So I saw you put cave goblins in C tier all the way down there. Do you care to just like say a quick thing about why you consider them so weak?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like that tier that I put together there was referring to competitive play. That's why, and I kind of like put it together in a minute, like pretty quickly. But the thing
Yeah,
is, if you think about competitive play, like that great hand that is able to take down anyone with a cable goblins is not going to happen often. It's going to happen out of every 3 games, one every 2 games, like whatever you want. Like it's not going to be every time, and it has very bad matchups like the fungal dwarves, things like that, in which like you have like a 10% chance of winning or 15, like something crazy like that. So that is why I put them as the worst ones, because in a competitive scenario like those guys have no chance. That was also the reason why the Obsidian dwarves, I put them as B on the like competitive play, just because of how much you rely on the luck of the roll. But those on the power level, they are A, right? Like they can bring down any deck, even the S tiers. Like when things go your way with the rolls with the Obsidian Dwarfs, they're devastating. On average, I would say they can take down any A tier deck, any S tier deck with normal rolls. But the thing is, there's always going to be every other game in which your rolls are just horrible. You keep getting specials with Valsar, and then they're going to
yeah,
destroy you. Right, so that's why I put them at B, because in a competitive scenario where you just need to win every time, because if you lose that single game, that's the difference between not making the final or the last group. You cannot be relying on that
I see. I see.
in that competitive field. So that's why I put those guys as B, and I put the Cave Goblins as C, because you do need consistency for that type of many rounds competitive scenarios. I didn't put the Tundra Orcs on B, even though they also rely sometimes on the luck of the roll, because they do have the reroll, a constant reroll mechanism, and they have become particularly good against some of the new factions, which some other decks, like a lot of decks today, struggle with the Forge or with the Grogs. But for some reason, like the Tundra Orcs, just because of some of the tools that they are decent against them. Like they're pretty good against them. I think
Yeah.
they're also good against like the Crimson Order and some of the new stuff, right? So that's why I said, like, you know why these guys can actually like stand against many of those, and it's not really that variable because you could get to reroll, so you reduce the reliance on getting lucky. Like it's still luck based. Like when you go with those big plays with For Glory, it's just see if you get lucky or not. And sometimes it's going to be a blowout. Sometimes you completely get destroyed. That still happens, but it's not that often, right? Many times when you put those plays together, you get to have your real role make things go your way, or not that like unlikely for them to go your way. So that's why those guys are on A.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, so since we're here, just a few more questions about that. You put Phoenix Elves in B. I would consider them A. Any particular reason for that?
I think they're not still strong enough to be consistently hanging out with all the big boys in A. If you think about it,
Gotcha.
like they're playable, and like if you know how to play them, you can make some really strong plays and all that stuff. But they are still slightly, let's say, underpowered. Like they have a lot of weak cards. You know, they would be A if you actually adjusted for maybe. Well, they could, like the main event, the epic event, the flashing thing. What's the name?
Or the blinding flare. That's not the epic, but
Blinding flare. Like if that was 0, and not sure, like that would tell them closer to A, right? Like, and in here, as you saw, I wasn't even considering like the A plus, A minus, and all that stuff, because it's just too subjective, right? It's just, but if you fix that, and for example, the champs, I think the dragon, many people have said it's overcosted, and I agree. Like, I think 7 would be what you would expect a unit like that to cost, right? Like nowadays with the standards of champions. So if that guy was
yeah.
7, if the epic event was 0, I would say, like, yeah, you could make the argument that they are A. Not sure if the mages are too weak. Like I've seen some mentions. I think at some point they try them having 3 range,
Yeah.
3 attack value. Like in there, I'm not sure if that would be too much. If they would be too strong that way or not. Maybe. Like, what do you think? Do you think it would be too much if they had 3 range?
I think it's a I don't think it's necessarily too much, but I think it's bad for the deck design overall because suddenly they become like the best common in the deck, and they're really good paired with Holios because you're hitting for four. So it just becomes play Holios every game, play all four mages every game. So yeah, I think it's too much.
Yeah, I agree. Like if you think about it, for one magic, getting that effect in which they will always need to be dealt to damage. I mean, there's always bad matchups in which they have ways of dealing extra damage, but that's normal, right? Sometimes some
Yeah,
units are just bad in some matchups and you discard them. So I agree, it would probably be too much. So really, the only things that they would need tuning to go to A is having that epic event at 0 and having the dragon at a playable level,
yeah.
which 7 would make it more likely that you're able to bring him, not just because it's like a very specific matchup in which they destroy all your gates or whatever, or but most of the times it's not economically like makes it doesn't make sense economically to bring him down. But with those two, I would say P would be on the A tier.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And I'm curious. Okay, I know we're. Do you want to talk about this for another 5-10 minutes, or do you want to save it for
I
another
do
day?
I do
'Cause
have 5 more. I have 5 more, but then I
okay,
have to
yeah,
run.
yeah. Well, we'll try to be quick because I'm curious about the tier list overall. I know people were every time you say something, everyone's talking about it, and I'm sure that's annoying. To your every word picked apart, but people like to hear what you have to say. The only other like thing that like surprised me in this list is fungal dwarves. Like I think fungal dwarves have like quite a few bad matchups like, against like shadow elves and swamp orcs and cloaks. So I would not consider them as for that, and the fact that I think like most of your A tier factions can have like some pretty decent, can have like at least like a 50-50 matchup against them, or like if you play right against fungal dwarves, they're not so scary. So I'd consider them A. I'm curious why you put those in S.
Yeah, I still think all of their cards, all of their units are extremely strong by themselves, and they also have this synergy that is just overwhelming. Like people who know how to play them
Mm-hmm.
are able to easily set up the engine, the recursion engine with the beasts, and they just become unstoppable. Like a lot of decks don't even really have many tools against that, and even if you go with champs and play it correctly, I feel like the odds are still against you in most situations. Like for example, you mentioned one bad matchup, Shadow Elves, but the truth with Shadow Elves, why they're so good is that like most people don't know how to play against them. Like they just play the game as against any other faction, and just play on the midfield, which is exactly what Shadow Elves wants you to do. The aggressive decks go at them, which sometimes can be hard as Shadow Elves, but they do have tools to survive that. But like the fungal dwarves, they tend to play that way going forward. And then the Shadow Elves have all the tools to remove the blockers, assassinate, because the Shadow Elves are ultimately an assassination faction. That's kind of one of their themes, all their tricks, all the things are to assassinate. So if the Fungal Dwarves really play in a completely different way that is really just turtling up, then the matchup is really hard for the Shadow Elves, and the odds go closer to 50-50. Maybe they even lean to the Fungal Dwarves. If you want to see this in practice, you can take a look at the final of the Tournament of Champions that I was playing against Aaron. I was Shadow Elves and he was the Fungal Dwarves.
Yeah, I think I've seen
And
it. Yeah.
yeah, by the second game, he noticed. Well, the first game he noticed that like how it's a blowout. If you just play Fungal Dwarves normally, you get blown apart. And I think on the second game, he just retreated and played on the back. And no, did he win the second one? No, I think
I think he
he
did
tried to
not.
do that on the second one, but he did it
Yeah.
maybe a little bit late. I don't know if at first he was on the midfield, but then he just retreated completely, and I was struggling. And at the end, it just came down to the luck of the roll at the end, like that allowed me to take that game. And if it went to a third game, him playing like that since the beginning, who knows if the Shallow Wells would have been able to even have a chance. So that's the thing with them, like how you play it. Makes a big difference in there if it leans or like you can balance out the nature of the matchup. It's going to be favoring Shadow Elves, but if you play the Fungal Dwarves differently, then you can remove that edge and advantage that they have. So that's why I say like the Fungal Dwarfs, I don't think they have like unwinnable matches. I think they have a lot of matchups in which they always have the advantage. Even the Swamp Orcs matchup, like yeah, like the Swamp Orcs have the advantage, but it's not like they don't stand a chance. Like many times it comes down to if you manage to get your 3/3 on the beasts, And that's the difference, like in that matchup, if you lose or not. Like, so it's really close to 50-50. So yeah, I don't think they have like awful matchups, like unwinnable matchups, things like that. The closest one could be Shadow Elves, but if you play defensively, it's really hard for them. It's the same thing with Fallen Kingdom, like that matchup, Fungal Dwarves, Fallen Kingdom. If you just rush forward with the Dwarves, the Fallen Kingdom have a really good chance of getting you. But if you just do like go defensively and build a fortress, the Fallen Kingdoms odds really go down and they lose most of the time.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it's definitely a discussion I'd be curious to resume another day because it's hard to talk about fungal dwarves just because they're so complicated just to like just to even discuss in the first place. I think I would still like from what I've seen I'd still disagree that I think uh like oh they can like effective what I've seen effective play against this against the fungal dwarves can keep them in their place, and I think like what I've talked with Aaron about like the shadow elves fungal dwarves play, and he says even with that the second strategy that he adopted, that is like I think I need to have that strategy of just being more passive with fungal dwarves. Even then it feels like a real uphill battle that's struggling, but that's uh yeah, that's complicated. I don't I don't know one way or the other. I'd be curious to make a bigger discussion out of it, but probably not enough
Yeah.
time today.
And but you raised some like interesting points about this thing on the list because it relates to that conversation that was happening about balancing, like balances on the decks, in which
Yeah,
like the perfect world where all the decks are playable and like all matches are feel like fair. It's one where all decks would be A tier, right? Like when everything
yeah,
is A tier, everything is like cards that are playable, that are not all the auto discards. Even if they're situational, that's okay as long as you can play them in sometimes, and it's not always like, yeah, this thing, it will never happen. And you always discard it. So the other ones that we see there in B and C are things that there's already like many things that you can adjust. Like everyone knows that they're like not balanced. That would make them A tier. Like we said the thing about Phoenix Elves, like with those two small changes, which everyone knows that that epic event should be 0, right? Like even in the tournaments, they used to turn it to 0. So that would be A. Then with the breakers, it's kind of similar. Think about it. Like if you make blast 0, which is also something that I think everyone agrees should be 0 in the
yeah,
tournaments, they used to tune it that way.
yeah,
And which I think that's the only card that it actually needs balancing. Like they would be closer to A. And you can always say with the breakers, you have the all range, so you rely more a little bit on the lock and all that. But
yeah,
just with that, the breakers, I would also be saying like, yeah, those guys can like hang with like most factions, and also the champs. That's the other issue they have. The champs are overcosted. The one that flies, I think that one should be 5 or something like that. It doesn't make
yeah.
sense for the value and the everything to be at 6. I think the one that is currently 7, not sure if it's balanced at 7 or if it could be 6. And the other dude that is 6, that is a 6/4. I mean, 6 health for 6 magic sounds a little bit crazy, right? It should be 7. Sounds like 7 is like what you would expect for a 7/4. You would expect if you're going to pay 6, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I could see debates either way because like a lot of like very skillful breakers players will just make it so you just cannot hit that champion Gildoon that gives the extra attacks because you just push him out of the way. But yeah, I do. It's especially with the flying champion Gwalark. Absolutely, I would absolutely buff Gwalark.
Yeah, exactly. That guy, and not sure the other two, as you say, it's debatable. Maybe they need a slight tuning, like you keep it at 6 so that it's not cheap. But the point is, with those slight changes, just like with the Phoenix Elves to the champs and to the epic event that everyone knows, that's not the epic one, I believe, but that everyone
Yeah,
knows that it shouldn't be 1, then
blinding
those
play.
guys would be able to hang out with any of the decks in the A tier. The Obsidian dwarves, they can hang out with any of them. Like I would say, I could say power level they are A, and I wouldn't change any of their cards. All of their cards are like properly costed. The what they do makes sense. It's just the nature of the game. Like part of the theme of the deck is that luck of the roll, which is awesome, right? It makes them really fun to play. So there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with them. I think that one is designed perfectly. And on the
Interesting.
power level, I would say they are already at the A level, and they just shift up and down depending on how you roll. And then
That,
Fallen Kingdom, I think there's
yeah.
been like many people say that the champions are unbalanced, like they're not great, which is right. Like if you adjust the champions so that they are like more costed to the standards of today of champions, because the standards have changed from the core set to today a lot, and you really need to bring those champions to the current standards so that they're playable and they can compete. If you do that, and I think the tuning that they had been playing for the summoner was like giving it 1 or 2 more life, right? So if you do that, that
Yeah.
deck could also just be said to be, yeah, that's A tier, easy A tier, right? Even right now today, because of the combos, the blood summons is a bit broken. You can just kill everything to make a huge units, which is part of its theme. But if you make the other adjustments, those guys would also become A tier. Finally, the cave goblins. I don't think any of their units. Only the champion needs adjustments. The huge one,
The eater.
the eater, right? Like that one, everyone knows that to the standards of today's champs, like there's one. It's like the consequence of him not killing something is just too brutal for its cost and everything it does. So that one could use some slight tuning. Other than that, every other card in the deck doesn't need adjustment. Like it's just also the issue, the nature of the deck. That is a swarm deck that sometimes is gonna have the things, like it's very reliant on getting early gates, things like that, but it's not an issue with the cards themselves. So I wouldn't see an issue with the cave goblins. It's just a fun deck to play. It's its theme, and it can take down anyone. It's not going to be consistent, but not every single deck needs to be consistent. Like the point
Yeah.
also is that the point is just that the cards are balanced to what they're supposed, like the cost and the value to the standards that you've set up for units. And finally, the Vanguard, like that's the one in which that one requires multiple changes. But I'm sure, like if you fix that one too on the things that are broken, it could also be an A tier, right? And like just spitballing, like the heal, that one everyone knows should be 0. Then the other events I think are okay, right? Like they don't have really any. Yeah, the other
Yeah.
events don't have any issues. And then the units that have problems, well, the champions, as usual with every champion on the core set, which for today's standards, they're useless. And most of them are useless. And they're not costed properly. So you need to revamp the one with magic, which is really, I think that one, I see it similar to Alvus. Like if you make it a 3 magic champ that has 5 life, and the 2 base health with the same ability, most of the time he's going to be shooting for 4. Like 3, 4, best case scenario 5. But if you're shooting for 5, that means that you're depriving yourself of other things. If you're depriving, like it's a cost benefits type of thing, right? So I don't think it would be broken if this guy was 5-2 for 3 magic. It would be more in line with the new champs, the stuff that we've been seeing coming out, and it will make sense to have a cheap champion because everything else is costed pretty high. What do you think if it was something like that?
That's interesting. I've considered 4 because it's like in line with like the OV, like the we have a lot of 4 magic to like 2/6 or like 4 magic 6 health range champs. Yeah, I think it could.
Yeah.
It's a really tough ability to balance. Like radiant shot. I don't know, just because it can just be kind of lame. But yeah, you could definitely just touch
Yeah.
him up.
Exactly. And what you say also could make sense. Like if you leave it at 6 life, it could cost 4 magic. So that maybe it's not too powerful or whatever. But at
Yeah,
5 live for 3, like I don't think like it's still easy to kind of kill. Like you can get a few shots of him, and it's hard to really get it super high if you think about like how much. Most of the time you're going to have around 4 magic, 5 magic, so you really get only 4 attack. So yeah, it could be either case, right? But clearly this guy is useless as it stands, needs to be adjusted. The other champ
yeah,
that is useless is the 6 magic, the one that draws cards.
yeah,
Like this one reached some major revamp. There's many ways in which you could fix this one, but the thing is, it makes no sense at 6 magic, 9 life, hitting for 3, 4, which is what usually it hits for. So I'm not even going to get into the ways of fixing this one because it could go many ways. but this one is an auto discard all the time. It's useless. Like it would need to be fixed. And finally, Colleen, I think what you get for 6, it's at least reasonable. So you could keep Colleen at this value because you do get the what you pay for when you get her down. Like 8/3 and then a great ability, it's worth it. So I wouldn't touch Colleen. And then finally, you have at least one unit which is completely useless. Like it's a unit that I think everyone would agree that unless maybe you play one at the beginning of the game, but then it's always just out of this card, and you don't want cards to just be trash like 90% of the time. So the Archer, I think that one is an easy fix. Like you could really just make him a 4/1 for 1 magic. If you think about it, that's the standard of the Frost Mage, right? Like the Frost Mage, you get for 1 magic, a 4 life, 1 attack. And then like, yeah, I mean, you can bump it up to be attacking for 3/4, which is the same thing that you can do with the Frost Mages with not a lot of investment, just to attack for 3. But this guy, it wouldn't really be broken because it's hard to be discarding 3-4 cards per turn, right? Which is when it would be really high. So most of the time you're going to be discarding 2 or 3, which is going to be attacking for 3. And then it's hard to sustain that for the game, during the game. You can do that in the first half of the game, and then he's going to go back into attacking for 2 maybe type of thing. But for 1 magic, it's reasonable because the guy would still be useful. He could be like this meat shield type of unit that you use. So that's an idea that like there could be also many ways of fixing it. But clearly, this guy needs to be fixed. And finally, I mean, the other unit, the priest, I don't think that one could be okay. Like once you have 1 magic unit, this guy has a role if you think about it. Like it's a 0 magic, like a 2/2, which is normal, has an ability that could potentially be relevant. So I wouldn't say that this one has like a design issue. Like I would keep it just to give it that versatility of having like a 0 cost, 1 cost, and 2 magic cost, which is pretty standard, like having that distribution. And then having playable champs and mass heal, I think this deck would be A tier. Like it would be able to compete with any deck almost.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I'm with you. It's the deck that needs the most tuning for sure. Like the most cards would need to change. I think out of all of your B and C tiers, the only one that has surprised me is the Obsidian dwarves actually. That you think power level wise they're A tier, because I'm just so used to hearing that just Obsidian dwarves, it's just like it's just too much of an uphill battle, that like you need to be aggressive, but it's just so easy to get chip damage on Balzar, and he just doesn't. He only has those 5 Ember Guards to defend himself, and then he's a sitting duck. I'm glad to hear that that you think at least power level wise or in the A tier. You just think the aggression potential is strong enough, and the champs are strong enough to be at that level.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're brutal. Like think about it. Like which card would you say it's underpowered? Like all of their cards serve a purpose. They give you a lot of flexibility, a lot of reach, like the different weapons, the summoning out of the spot. Like although all the cards by themselves, I think they're really strong. They have this like transportation of units from one end to the other with the guards. It has the protection for the summoner. It has a summoner that like has so many tools, and they can play aggressive. They can play defensive. All the champions are good. All the champions are playable. Like I really have no clue why some people would say that they're weak or not good. I guess, I mean, you see the players that know how to play them well, and they're just like a devastating faction. Like I never, when I get matched and see that I'm playing Obsidian dwarves, it's never like, yeah, this is gonna be easy. It's always like, oh boy, here comes the dwarves. Like those guys are just brutal, and you're never really safe because they have suddenly a lot of range. They hit really hard. They can just overwhelm you with Valsar and do some crazy stuff. So no clue why anyone would say that they are weak. I guess they could say maybe they're weak because sometimes like you see him roll out a lot of specials and they just like never get traction or things like that. But even in those situations, if you play conservatively, like you can get around that because you eventually are going to get your boosts. I guess sometimes I see people playing them like just like this suicide strategy in which they just rush forward like maniacs and they just try to like kill you and overwhelm you, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. and maybe that's why people have that idea that you have to play them that way. But I don't think you really like that's the ideal way of playing them. I like more like taking control of the midfield and playing with Valsar conservatively and just get him to be a complete menace.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard to lose with them when you do that. If you get like just overall rolls.
Interesting. Well, you make me want to jump in there more with them. I've for a while now I've considered them like slightly under the curve, and I've thought that like a little bit of extra health to Balzar, just because he's so hard to defend, would bring them up to A. But hey, if you're right, I'm glad to hear it, because they're a fun faction. They add a lot to this game.
Yeah, exactly. They're extremely fun. And if you think about it, like I don't think they have any card that you would say that card is weak or that card is like not giving you enough for what it's supposed to
Yeah,
do. Like the closest
absolutely.
one, the Berserkers, by themselves, it's like not mind blowing. But the thing of the Berserkers is that they're supposed to be used with the axe.
Yeah,
I never really play a Berserker just to go and attack for two. Even if sometimes like I have the like another target to the side, which maybe I get like a free ping. I always save
yeah,
them for the use with the axe, and then they're just monsters. And so maybe that's if you just see them as an independent thing, but because you also have the champion that allows you to be recurring, like the those weapons just becomes like a big threat. So yeah, I
yeah,
wouldn't say that they need any card to be changed. It's one of the like I would say best deck designs that I've seen. Like they all have synergy. They're super fun. They're super unique. So yeah, I'm a big fan of them. Really, I play them every now and then, and it's as you say one of the most fun decks to play. And they can hang
yeah,
out with anyone. I never feel with when I'm playing with them that I just don't have, stand a chance. Like when you play with the Cave Goblins or the Vanguard, many times you just say like, "Oh, it's this faction," and then you never stand a chance. It doesn't matter what you do. Like that never happens with the Obsidian dwarves. Like those guys can stand with anyone.
Do you think if Cave Goblins got a better eater that they would that would bump them up for you, or you think you would still get that feeling of no, just doesn't can't do it?
No, it wouldn't bump them. Like that's really just to adjust the balance so that no card is useless of the
Yeah,
deck. But I would say if you're thinking on a competitive, they would still be on the C tier because it's the most like luck dependent faction, like the most in which you rely on chance to allow you to just devastate someone.
I see.
If you're
I
just
see.
thinking like once you adjust the ether to something that is also a threat, all their champs would be playable, and at that point I could see them being B. And even if you're just thinking of like casual play, maybe they're still B. But the thing is, they will never really be A because they're really just chance dependent, luck dependent type of faction. So I
Yeah,
would
that's fair.
say
That's
like
fair.
they probably don't have a chance of being A, and they also have some very bad matchups because of their own nature of having a lot of small creatures and a lot of like low damage output type of thing. So there are just some matchups that they're just bad. Like they just don't really stand a chance in those matchups, which is
Yeah,
not the same for most of the decks. Like they have slightly better matchups, slightly worse matchups. Many times by playing differently, you can overcome that disadvantage, right? To bring it close to 50-50.
yeah,
But with the cave goblins, because they only have one strategy, like there's no two ways of playing the cave goblins. Like it's not like you can play them defensively, right? Like the fungal
yeah,
drives, you can play the midfield, you can play aggressive, you can play defensive. The cave goblins only have one mode, and it's just all crazy, surround you, swarm, all forward, and that's the only way they have. So if that doesn't work well against the opposing faction, and you lose. Like that's you're going to lose most of the time, and that's why I would say that they would always just be like a C or B tier if you like them very much. Okay, and but the thing is, I wouldn't change anything on them outside from the Eater because it's just a design thing that with the new
yeah,
standard of champions, that Eater just it's a never play card. It's just not a good card. It should be a little bit better to be in balance. But they're a fun match. They're a fun faction. I wouldn't change any other thing on them to make them stronger because not every single faction needs to be good in competitive play. They just need to
yeah,
be able
yeah,
to have a theme, have a thing that they do, be able to do it well, have synergy, and then be able to all cards be playable for that synergy, right? Not have any cards that you say like this card is I don't get enough value for the card in any scenario almost at all. as long as they don't have that, then the deck is well. It's okay, and I wouldn't really change it. And that's the case with the goblins, with
Yeah.
those goblins.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The only thing with the eater is I think a buff eater would help with some bad matchups, like especially against like fungal dwarves, like helps like because their issue is all these low cost units. It's nice to just have that answer of a big champion. But yeah, with the fun, if you're saying that the fundamental thing is the luck dependence, the draw dependence, I'm with you, and I'm also with you if that shouldn't change, and and that's okay. And I think to wrap things up here, like you sort of propose this list, saying that you're frustrated or you're sick of playing only with these matchups of these S tier factions of competitive play. You have the even if it's like taking S tier versus taking A tier factions to a tournament, like say that like doubles your chances or whatnot. That like you need to take these S tier factions into the tournaments, and that it's and so you're just seeing you're just seeing the matchups between these S tier factions over and over again, and so
Mhm.
would you agree with that and say that then like for competitive play that is the biggest issue, just if there's anything in S tier as opposed to what we're shooting for the A tier, if there's anything in S tier then suddenly everyone has to do that, and so that's just the meta and that sucks.
Exactly. That's like in the last tournament, I knew I wanted to have a chance, so I picked two of the S tier. But I'm tired of playing those, so I didn't want to pick four of them. So I said like I'm gonna play two of the A tier, like the orcs and the mountain barga, just
Yeah,
because I didn't like. Otherwise, it's a grind that is like, oh, I don't even want to go through this. Like, so that's why I did. I think a lot of players do that just because they like some of the A tiers, and the A tiers do have a chance, right? At the end of the day, like you might have like slightly worse odds, like 60, 40, 55, 45, whatever, but it's still like you have a chance, so it doesn't feel like such a big deal.
yeah.
But yeah, so that's the thing. And some of the A tiers, the reason why they are A tier is just because they're on balance in different ways. So there are ways to fix the S tiers too by making minor adjustments so that they're balanced the other way around. Some of them, their nature is just like strong, like shadow elves, in which you need to know how to play against them. Otherwise, you're always going to feel like you're on the losing end of it, but all the cards are balanced and they all do like just like they have synergy and do something that makes sense. So I wouldn't adjust anything on those. I don't think the fungal dwarves need any further adjustment. I think the savannah elves, they probably don't need any adjustment. Only the champion that is unplayable, the tree. But other, I don't think those guys like have. They're just strong by the and the summoner at 4 attack would probably fix it because right now, yeah, they are a little bit too strong, and but having a Vu at 4 would probably just fix them and bringing them closer to still being close to A plus, but A. And the other two, that could be a whole other conversation. So
Yeah.
we can have, at this point, you probably want to break out this whole section to be its own video so that it's not on the video for
Yes,
the
I
Legendary
was
Matchup
thinking as
Showcase.
well.
And we could do like another conversation in the future. Like I don't mind having like it's cool to talk about this stuff, talking because it's fast. I don't like getting into this typing because it just takes too long, like
Oh
typing so
yes.
much.
You can
So
type all
that's why,
day.
yeah, exactly. It's, because it's a lot of details, right? And then you can be talking about a lot of those. But we could do another conversation and talking about those things. And hopefully, I mean, one day we get like customization or some mods or something, and we can make the dream happen. Hopefully, there's enough people that would be interested in like creating that balance mod in which everything is close to A tier, everything is balanced, and that's the dream. Hopefully, we get there sometime.
Yeah, no, it's a super interesting discussion, and thanks for taking the extra time for it. And yeah, so sometime later we could definitely like it'd be fun to even just I mean I suppose we could go through each one of them. The only thing the things we should not talk about now, but the that I would save for or even a later showcase mentioning is I'm curious to hear more of your thoughts about like specifically how you play against shadow elves, what that play is. But we should save that for later. And I'm curious also to talk about wayfarers in A tier, because I think a lot of people would consider them less than that. But those discussions and discussing all the other all the other factions and what puts them in that power level and where that comes from, we can save that. But yeah, that's all That's
So
super
that's a good
interesting.
idea. Yeah, like I guess the next video we do, like until the next league start, maybe we can do one just to show how to play against the Shadow Elves. That will kind of like bring them down a notch because I never, I never play them on the public queue because I'm just tired of playing them so much on the like tournaments and things like that. And it's amazing like how big of a difference it is when you play in a completely unusual way. Not all decks have the tools to play that way fully, but maybe I can try to find some replays that show kind of like that dynamic that I'm thinking of. And yeah, we can maybe do a video of that, like maybe a 30-minute, 1 hour video showing how to play against the Shadow Elves.
Yeah, I would
And
love to.
yeah,
Oh yeah, we got time. I would absolutely love to.
okay, yeah, let's set that up for maybe next weekend or the week after.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and thanks for taking the extra time to to chat about that. I was just curious to hear your takes about some of these.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Always a pleasure, man. And thank you everyone for watching.
Yep. All right. I'll see you later.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Yep. And thanks everyone so much for watching. This is a ton of fun. Get some bonus content. Get to hear some of Vexer's takes about this competitive tier list for like taking factions into tournaments where you're like playing like 40 games total of like pools of like 9 players and then 3 pools. Yeah, hopefully we'll talk about this a little bit more, and then we will also be back for season 22 whenever that happens. Probably starts in 2-3 weeks or something. Leagues always popping. All fun season of matchups. Yeah, hopefully I'll catch you for the next one. Hopefully I can give Vexer another run for his money. Hopefully it won't be another steamrolling. Hopefully I can get at least 2 victories in there. We shall see. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll catch you next time. Bye.